All right, welcome back. This is exam 3 study guide review. And so this is strength conditioning. My name is Andy Sykes. For those that don't know me, we'll go over the strength conditioning exam 3 review. And so we start with chapter 12, test selection and administration for exercise testing. Again, as with the previous exams, make sure that you read the chapter, the textbooks. Obviously the slides are going to help you that have information. Go to the end of each chapter, look at the questions that there are there, test yourself on those chapter quizzes. The answers are in the back of the textbook, so you can see what the information. I have pulled some of those, so that give me questions, give me points. Just need to know what they are. And then as you go through, again, the bold key terms are listed throughout, and they're also listed in bullet point fashion at the end of this chapter. Make sure you're familiar with each and every one of those. Okay, know what they are, be able to define them. I might not be asking you to define them, but in doing so, you'll be able to answer questions about them if you know what they are. So know the key terms, know the quizzes and the answers to those quizzes. Okay, that's for each of those chapters, 12 through 15. We've got test selection, administration and scoring, warm-up and stretching, and resistance training and spotting techniques. Now, this is quite a short exam in comparison to the other ones. It's only a few different points here, so let's get through them. It doesn't look like we've got anyone that will be posting questions, so I'll do my best to explain them. But I'm not giving you all the answers. You've got to study and read this information yourself. That's the way you're going to learn it. Okay, so types of tests under test selection and administration. Okay, go through in the textbook. You're going to see either you've got the fourth or the third edition. Doesn't really matter. I think they're just the page numbers will be different if we was to talk about those. But page 239 on the third edition. What type of tests are there? You know, there are field tests. There are lab tests. There are things that need required equipment and some that don't. So that gives you the ability to run those tests differently, okay, where they can be held in the environment. We have tests that are before in the preseason. We have tests that maybe in the mid part of the season, maybe in the in season. And we have tests at the end of the season or postseason. Okay, why are we testing? What is the point of giving an assessment or a test to these athletes? Okay, hopefully, okay, it is to see that your program, that the training program that these athletes are on is working, that they should be improving. Okay, and that goes into what tests you are selecting, and is it going to show a prediction or a correlation to performance on the court or on the field or in the weight room, depending on what that sport is. So that goes into test selection, right? Why are we picking these tests? Okay, make sure it is valid and specific to the sport. Okay, to the specific position within the sport. Some players in certain teams will be vastly different in body type, in strength, in agility, in the demands that are asked of them based on their position in that sport. So what tests are you designing for that athlete? Specify the athlete, specify the position, to specify the sport and why you're choosing those. Okay, vertical jump, great for explosive power, learning a lot about the Phosphagen system. Okay, not great at telling me about your ability to wrestle and grapple and forearm strength, core strength. Okay, so make sure it's valid, and that's the reason why you're actually doing that test. And that goes under the different types of validity, okay, and then reliability on being able to replicate that test multiple times. So you've got a couple different types of validity. You've got the face validity. Is it actually look like it's testing what it's testing? So as an athlete, do I know what I'm expected, what a good result would look like, or do I have no idea that what this test is actually testing, so I don't know how to really achieve the best score. Construct and content Okay, does it have the theory behind it? Is that going to test what it is going to be testing, what you want it to test? Does that test actually achieve that? And then does that predict or have a correlation to improve performance? Okay, is that test valid? Because if you see an increase in score in that test, you should also see an increase in performance at that score. Okay, so that makes it convergent and predictive using the current science. So you also have the different in test time and the official or the moderator of a test. So who's actually doing that? So you have different reliabilities. If you have the same person officiating each test, then you're going to be slightly more reliable. You're going to see a more strict protocol versus if you have two different people doing the test at two different times, you're going to get slightly different results because maybe their methods are slightly different. How strict are they actually holding to the prescribed method of that test? So that's inter-rater variability, right? You've got different raters, inter-rater. You also got intra-rater variability. That's the same tester, same person intra, and how they may be scoring differently from day to day, evening to morning. Lots of things change, but intra is the same person that could give you different types of deviation. And then intra-subject, okay, how is that athlete performing on that day? The same athlete tested one day and then another day. What are the difference in the results? Should they be the same? Are they the same, or are things impacting those results maybe more so than just performance? Maybe there's stuff going on in their lives that's affecting how they're performing in those tests. So you get variability in those areas. And then when we start to get these results coming in, we can then identify the central tendencies, the mean, the mode, the median, the range, the standard deviation. Okay, that's really what we start looking at. Is once we get a set of test scores for a certain group, you're going to look at what's the standard deviation for that group? So what's the mean? And then what's the standard deviation? So how often is it from the mean? And then you create z-scores from that standard deviation. A z-score means how many standard deviations you are away from that mean. Positive means you're greater than the mean. Negative means you're less than the mean. So we're looking at z-scores, standard deviations to try and interpret results of testing. Athlete variability is the next bullet point there. So what would we likely to see in different tests based on different athletes? Okay, as an athlete comes from childhood into adolescence into adult, you're probably going to see an increase in performance, an increase in scores. Generally, that's the rule, but maybe that isn't always the rule. Maybe flexibility decreases. So age is something that will vary scores. Gender, male and female, really shouldn't be compared under most assessments. So that's something to be aware of. Has this athlete done this test before? If they've done it before, they kind of know what they're trying to achieve. And so they may have a increased likelihood to score better. If you have no idea, if you've never done it before, there's a lot of learning happening, and scores, of course, won't be as good. Testing order and safety. Okay, you've got to select these tests. Hopefully they're valid and you're choosing what tests. And this goes into your semester projects. So not only are you being tested on multiple choice through this exam, but now learn that information and then apply it to your semester project. Testing order goes basically on energy systems. Going through this textbook, it talks about the order: non-fatiguing tests, followed by agility tests, maximum power and strength, sprint tests, local muscular endurance, fatiguing anaerobic capacity tests, and then aerobic capacity tests. We actually did this through our athletic profile. We did these tests in the right order, and you did and got results. So you've gotten an experience of this already. Now you have to understand why that is the way, and that's to do with the energy systems that are being used. Okay, if an energy system is going to fatigue the body, or a test is going to use an energy system that fatigues the body, we don't want that prior to a next test. So we do tests that are non-fatiguing first, then the most powerful using phosphagen energy system, those that are using strength, then moving on to more of our local endurance and then aerobic endurance. So each one would be more fatiguing and would impact the previous one. So we put it in that order to achieve the greatest results and fair results and make sure that we're safe. We're not absolutely fatiguing the body by doing maybe a 1.5 mile run and then asking them to squat 1 rep max. Doing those back to back would not be good. So understanding that there's an order to it. And then making sure people are safe. So is it the right conditions to do this? Do they have experience? Do we have spotters for your max testing? Do you have the right equipment? Is it the right temperature? Are you outside? Are you aware of the heat index? Okay, are people dressed correctly? All these things. What time of the day are you doing the tests? Is that a good time? Will that help get a good score? Will that help be reliable? And are you going to be able to do it at the same time next time when you do the post test? Again, we're trying to see, is your program working? Pre-test, post-test, and then that should give you some idea of improvements, and hopefully that links to improved performance on the sport itself. So then the next chapter is administration, scoring, and interpreting those results. So through the textbook, it actually gives you a number of different tests. You have to know what those tests, especially the ones it covers in the book, basically the method of testing the testing, what the athlete should do. And again, you've gone through at least 10 of these, but there is a few more listed in the textbook that you should be aware of. What is it testing? Okay, what aspect of fitness? Okay, is it testing your flexibility? Is it testing your muscular strength? Is it testing your power? Is it testing your cardiovascular efficiency? Okay, know what each test is testing. You've got to be able to know that, and then you want to know what are the protocols. Okay, so if you have the T test, okay, what way are you running, and then what way you're turning? Do you have to touch the floor? Is it just the foot that has to touch the floor? Is it a stopwatch near a second? Understand what these tests are. There will be multiple choice questions over those, and the book covers them. If you know the information in the book, you'll be able to pass those questions pretty easy. Then what sort of scores do you think should be achieved? You want to know in a general sense what a good score versus bad score is for these tests. A 40-yard sprint, 40-yard acceleration test, what sort of time would be good to achieve there? And depending on the age, of course, you're not going to be able to memorize every different, the book gives you all sorts of normative data for different types of sports and different tests and the athlete's age and gender related. And you're not going to be able to memorize all of those, but have an idea of what scores would normally be an outcome of those tests. A 40-yard sprint test, again, 4 seconds would be great. 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds. Those are a little slower, but it shouldn't be something like 10 seconds. Okay, that's very easy to achieve, and you should see a lower score than that. So that's just kind of an example there. And where errors come in, be able to identify reasons for errors. That maybe it's the protocol that's being followed, or maybe there's an error in the method of testing it. Body fat percentage on a BIA gives you a 4 to 6% error. Okay, so knowing those a little bit more, and that's really what we have about tests. Then we move on to the warm-up and stretching, which we covered this week as a practical. And last week we did the warm-ups with the ramp protocol. So make sure you're knowing that ramp protocol, okay? Raise, activate, mobilize, potentiate. You should know that hands down by now, okay? That raise protocol, and then what each of those sections are. Raise, we're raising the blood temperature, the heart rate, the viscosity, the force product, well, it goes in potentiation, but we're raising the body to become more active. Then you have the activation. What muscles do you want to be active? and maybe have increased range of motion, which is the mobilizing part. Which muscles do you want to be tighter and stronger and not have motion? Okay, so different joints about the body. Remember, we talked about mobility, stability through the body in each joint. Know which areas we want to be tight and immobile, and which areas we want to be loose and mobile. Okay, they're different throughout the body. And then potentiate. How do we increase activation, neural drive to get stronger contractions and better results from the workout that will follow? Then we have types of stretching. Okay, we talked about this week too. Static stretching, most commonly done, right? We see it all the time. When is a good time to do that? That is once you're warm, right? Once the muscles have had blood flow, that they have gone through this ramp protocol. Now they're fatigued and able to actually relax and stretch. And we do that generally after exercise, after we're warm and we have good blood flow. We don't do it prior. The only time we really do is if an athlete is struggling to achieve a range of motion that an exercise requires. Otherwise, there's a dynamic type of stretch, which is, the next type would be better, where we are moving, that we are going through this warm up and getting blood flow to the active areas. Okay, that's dynamic, and then can go into ballistic as you potentiate that dynamic warm up and go into more really sudden rapid contractions and having a little bit more impact maybe on joints as you warm up, more into our gymnastics, our plyometric type workouts that we're warming up for. We have PNF stretching, which we've talked about, 3 different types of PNF: the hold, relax, the hold, agonist contraction to stretch, and then the third type, which is the hold, relax, antagonist contraction to increase. Remember, we've got autogenic inhibition, or we've got reciprocal inhibition. Okay, understanding that the GTOs, those organs that are at the terminal ends of our muscle in those tendons, are detection tension. Once they're activated, they shut down muscle activity. So we can use that and leverage that to decrease tension in the muscle and have a stretch actually occur. Again, when is it a good time to do this? Well, the muscle should be warm to allow a stretch. Again, if it's warm, maybe it's slightly fatigued, it's more willing to give up, more willing to actually stretch. So knowing about the PNF stretching that we have too. Knowing what stretches stretch what muscles, right? If we're trying to stretch the hamstrings, increase hamstring stretch, doing a tricep stretch is not going to help them. Okay, so knowing what they are actually stretching, understanding the anatomy to the stretch, right? We're trying to get the origin insertion as far away as possible to stretch. Okay, and then if we use PNF techniques or whatever, we, contracting against those fixed points, or maybe they move and then go up to a more increased range of motion. The static stretch is full range of motion, right, as far as we can, and holding it and trying to increase that. Okay, so understanding what's happening in each stretch, what muscles are being stretched, and how we can get that origin as far away from possible. Maybe it's a rotation of the bone, right, as well as just the abduction or the extension or flexion to get the muscle stretched. Then how can we, based on the insertion point, the origin point, how can we increase it just slightly more? Can we rotate slightly and get that origin or insertion further away and have a more efficient stretch? What things affect your flexibility? Okay, sometimes your joints get in the way. Okay, bone on bone, there is no chance of increased motion if bone is hitting bone. Okay, everyone's slightly different at their origins insertions, or their girth of bone, the amount of bone, how much muscle someone has. If you've got a lot of muscle, you're not going to be as flexible as someone that doesn't have as much. Okay, your range of motion isn't going to be as good because you've got more structure, more mass there to move around. So that can limit your range of motion. What genders do we see having more flexibility? Okay, what hormones go into that potentially? How we can, stretch soft tissue and maybe mobilize some fascia with some myofascial release techniques. But a tendon doesn't stretch. Okay, it can, but it's going to bounce back. It's elastic or elastin inside of the tendons that really don't give any malleability to change and deform like a muscle does. Muscle spindles will go into that, the stretch reflex with the GTOs, we kind of talked about that already. What else do we have here? That's it for that chapter, so knowing those different stretches. And then the last chapter in this exam would be the resistance training and spotting techniques. Now we have to think back to when we did our 5 rep max testing, part of the assessments, to what I was saying about how we spot on those. Now the textbook, of course, is going to go through even more exercises, so make sure you're reading the textbook, doing the quizzes, looking at the key terms, but no hand positions on a barbell, or even different hand positions on pulley attachments or dumbbells, on how you can manipulate and vary an exercise based on the hand position. Okay, you've got normal pronated grip, generally used on the majority of barbell exercises, where we have both hands over the bar and thumb around and we're gripping it, right? Pronated, just a standard normal grip. What happens if we alternate grip, have one supinated, one pronated? Is this a stronger grip? Why would we do this? What exercises would require this? Should we do both? If we do both, so that's alternating. What about just supinating? What exercises would require supinated grip, and why would we do that compared to a pronated grip? Okay, understanding again, origin insertion of muscles. What changes when we rotate a forearm, our wrist to achieve a different hand position? What changes when we change the width of our hand position on a barbell, or when we do an exercise? What is happening when we do vary the width of our arms, or even our legs in a squat, when we have wide squat like a sumo squat versus a normal squat or a narrow squat? What change is happening in the muscle activation and therefore stress on the body for adaptation? So start to understand the anatomy of the exercises, what's happening with the muscles, and therefore what stress is being applied. The different grips we'll go back to again. Normal grip with the thumb around. We've got hook grip, where our fingers close over the thumb around the bar. Often a struggle for the thickness of depending on the size of your hands. Can be painful, but very strong grip. So again, knowing how strong, is this a stronger grip? This is than a normal grip. Pronated, supinated, neutral, where the palms face each other. Okay, when we might want to use that and what difference it makes to the activation. Maybe a pull up this way versus pronated pull up, or chin up, or the neutral grip version, or maybe a variation of each. Why one's easier than the other? What's happening? Understand the differences of those variations going through. Different lifting techniques. Let's talk about Valsalva. Okay. Generally, through all exercises, you're told to breathe, okay? That helps decrease the blood pressure that could spike when you have hard muscle contraction. But that can be a benefit to increasing stability. And so the Valsalva maneuver is when we take that big breath in. Normally happens with very compound, heavy lifts like squat and deadlift, bench, things that require extreme tension to do it correctly and keep the spine safe. What we can do is breathe in and add pressure, adding more contents, more mass into the torso. Squeeze that, don't breathe out, squeeze it all together, actually push out and create a nice 360-degree cylinder around the spine, create tension, no movement. This is low back, lumbar spine, and then have a nice rigid torso to perform an exercise. Okay, that Valsalva maneuver, we hold it, we complete the exercise rep. Once we're finished, we breathe out. And we can release the tension. But we want to utilize that and leverage that increased pressure by that breath, holding it, blocking the glottis, not breathing out, using that and creating extreme rigidity through the torso. So that's the Valsalva that we use. Sometimes that wouldn't be good. If we're stretching, we don't want to use the Valsalva. We want to have pressure. And then, what is there clients or athletes that may not want to do that because of medical reasons? It's going to increase blood pressure. So you've got to be aware of that. Spotting techniques. Okay, again, what grip do we use? Go back to hand position. What grip is the safest when we're spotting? The alternating grip, so it can't slip out your hands. It slips out of one, it grips into the other, slips out of that one, grips back into the other. An alternating grip when we're doing bench or things of that nature. How we stand in those positions. Again, the textbook goes over it. I mentioned it during our practicals, but where are you strong? Okay, what communication are you having with the athlete as they're about to lift? Okay, how many reps are you trying to achieve? Okay, do you want assistance, or you don't want me to touch it at all? You know, wait until last minute. How many spotters do you need to make sure this is safe? Generally, one hopefully would be good, but it depends on the load and the strength of that athlete, the strength of the spotter. Are they able to lift it off if things go bad? Okay, generally you're only going to need to help 5% or so, otherwise the rep would have gone up. But if things go bad and there's an injury, how are we going to maintain safety? By having enough spotters. So at what point do we need to add a second spotter or a third spotter? How do we organize ourselves either side of the bar, one behind the athlete, when there is different number of spotters? So read through that. And then muscles under stress in the movement. So again, this is going back to hand positioning. This goes back to foot positioning. But why are you choosing this exercise? What does this exercise do? What muscles is it stretching or stressing? And a variation is changing it how? You know, easy example, we can squat, right? And I've talked about the width of the feet position, but what about if we change the bar position from high bar to low bar? Okay, moving that further down our back, we talked about this again in our practicals, means that keeping that bar in our center of gravity where it always has to be, but moving it down our back means we have to lean over more. Okay, we have to pivot at the hips more. That means that we have more of a stretch on the glutes when we're in that low position, which means we have to contract further with the glutes, making it more dominant when we go low bar. When it's high bar and it's higher up and we have to sit back slightly, we don't have to, we can be more upright. We have more quad stretch, okay? We'll see that our hamstrings touch the calves a lot easier. We get more knee flexion. That means we need more knee extension. What's responsible for that? The quads, okay? So understanding the changes a variation of exercise does, understanding the exercise in its own right, what's happening at joints. Look at the joint range of motion. Is it flexion? Is it extension? Okay, we've seen extension happening at this joint. What is responsible for extension at that joint? Okay, that muscle is under stress. That muscle is being activated. Or which ones are being stabilized and which ones are just playing maybe an isometric role that is just helping create a good foundation for the agonist, the main prime movers, to use and contract and push or pull against. So that's resistance training. Hopefully this has been helpful. I don't see any chat happening. So I'll end it there. If you have questions, talk to me in class. Send me an email, andy.sykes@wish.edu. Hope this is helpful. Good luck on exam 3. Multiple choice, just like the others. I'll see you in class. Thanks.